The human who outlasted her deadliest trial. She couldn't look away, Zara. 9 pressed her 4-fingered hand against the observation deck's transparent barrier, her violet eyes fixed on the human female below. The creature called herself Amy Johnson, and for the past 18 solar cycles, she had defied every expectation the Caltharian Research Council had established about her species. The testing chamber stretched 300 meters in every direction, its walls lined with sensors that monitored everything from heart rate to neural activity. What had begun as a routine study of human endurance capabilities had evolved into something far more disturbing. Amy Johnson would not break. Commander Vex 7 materialized beside Zara 9, his elongated form casting shadows across the control panels. His species, the Caltharians, had conquered 47 star systems through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. They had studied thousands of sentient species, cataloging weaknesses and strengths with scientific precision. Humans were supposed to be fragile, emotional, and easily manipulated. Amy Johnson was proving them wrong in ways that made Zara 9's internal organs shift uncomfortably. The human sat in the center of the chamber, her brown hair matted with perspiration, her simple gray clothing torn from repeated trials. The Caltharians had subjected her to psychological warfare, physical endurance tests, and sensory deprivation that would have shattered the minds of most beings. Yet she remained upright, her green eyes alert and defiant. Vex 7 activated the communication system, his voice echoing through the chamber with cold authority. Amy Johnson looked up at the observation deck, though she could not see through the one-way barrier. Her gaze seemed to pierce directly into Zara 9's soul. The latest trial began without warning. The chamber floor opened to reveal a maze of corridors filled with holographic threats designed to trigger every known fear response. Creatures from humanity's evolutionary past materialized around Amy, their forms shifting between predators that had once hunted her ancestors and abstract terrors pulled from human mythology. Zara 9 watched as Amy stood slowly, her movements deliberate despite obvious exhaustion. The human had been given minimal food and water, just enough to keep her alive. Sleep deprivation should have made her hallucinate, but her responses remained rational and calculated. A massive shadow beast lunged toward Amy, its claws extending toward her face. The human stepped sideways, using the creature's momentum to guide it past her body. When 3 more appeared, she positioned herself near a wall, limiting their approach angles. Her tactics were not those of a warrior, but of someone who understood survival at a fundamental level. Vex 7 increased the intensity. The holographic threats multiplied, filling the maze with dozens of predators. The noise level rose to frequencies that should have overwhelmed human hearing. Temperature fluctuations cycled between Arctic cold and desert heat within minutes. Amy Johnson adapted. When the cold struck, she moved continuously, generating body heat through motion. During heat waves, she found shadows and controlled her breathing to minimize water loss. She created weapons from debris, fashioned tools from her torn clothing, and turned environmental hazards into defensive advantages. Zara 9 felt her respiratory system falter as she watched the human navigate a corridor filled with venomous serpents. Amy had observed their strike patterns during previous encounters and now moved with fluid grace, avoiding fangs by centimeters. When one serpent cornered her, she used a broken piece of flooring to pin its head, then continued forward without hesitation. The psychological attacks proved even more disturbing to observe. The Caltharians projected images of loved ones in distress, phantom voices calling for help, and scenarios designed to trigger guilt and despair. Most species broke within hours of such manipulation. Amy Johnson recognized the illusions. She spoke aloud during these moments, her voice steady despite her circumstances. She recited what appeared to be poetry, mathematical equations and fragments of songs. When phantom children cried for rescue, she acknowledged them politely but continued forward. When images of dying family members appeared, she closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with renewed determination. Vex 7's frustration became evident in his rapid color changes, a Caltharian stress response. He activated additional protocols, introducing time pressure and resource scarcity. Amy would have to reach specific checkpoints within decreasing time limits, while managing limited supplies. The human adapted again. She, learned to conserve energy during easier sections and push herself during critical moments. When given choices between multiple paths, she quickly evaluated risks and benefits, often selecting routes that appeared more dangerous but offered strategic advantages. Her decision-making remained sharp, despite prolonged stress. Zara 9 found herself leaning closer to the barrier as Amy encountered the maze's most challenging section. Walls shifted randomly, creating new passages while closing others. Gravity fluctuated between Earth normal and 3 times standard. The air composition changed unpredictably, forcing rapid adaptation to different oxygen levels. Amy Johnson not only survived but began to predict the patterns. She noticed that wall movements followed subtle mathematical progressions. Gravity changes preceded specific visual cues. Air composition shifts correlated with temperature variations. Within hours, she was anticipating changes and positioning herself advantageously before they occurred. Vex 7's color shifted to deep crimson, indicating extreme agitation. He activated the maze's final protocol, one designed to break the strongest minds through complete sensory chaos. Reality itself became unreliable as the chamber generated contradictory stimuli that should have induced complete disorientation. Amy Johnson closed her eyes and continued forward. She navigated by sound, touch, and spatial memory while her other senses were bombarded with false information. When the chamber tried to convince her she was falling, she trusted her inner ear. When phantom walls appeared solid, she extended her hands to verify reality. When voices screamed contradictory directions, she followed her internal compass. Zara 9 watched in growing amazement as the human female reached the maze's center. Amy stood in the completion zone, breathing heavily but victorious. Her green eyes turned upward toward the observation deck, and once again Zara 9 felt that unsettling sensation of being truly seen. Vex 7 deactivated the maze with visible reluctance. The chamber returned to its original sterile configuration, leaving Amy standing alone in the vast space. She sat down cross-legged, closed her eyes, and appeared to meditate. Other Caltharian researchers gathered at the observation deck, their conversations filled with bewilderment and concern. Amy Johnson had completed trials designed for trained military specialists from the galaxy's most aggressive species. She had done so without advanced technology, genetic modifications, or pharmaceutical enhancement. She had succeeded through pure human determination. Zara 9 accessed the monitoring data, studying Amy's biological responses throughout the trials. The human stress hormones had remained elevated but stable. Her neural activity showed patterns of intense focus rather than panic. Most remarkably, her psychological profiles indicated growth rather than deterioration under pressure. The implications were staggering. If one average human female could perform at these levels, what capabilities did their species possess collectively? Earth's population exceeded 7 billion individuals, and if even a fraction demonstrated similar potential, the strategic balance of the galaxy might shift dramatically. Vex 7 initiated emergency protocols, sealing the research facility and restricting communication with the Caltharian High Command. Too much was at stake to allow this information to spread without careful consideration. Amy Johnson opened her eyes and looked directly at the observation deck again. This time she smiled. The expression sent chills through Zara 9's exoskeleton. It was not the smile of someone who had been tested and found their limits. It was the smile of someone who had been tested and discovered they had no limits. The human stood and walked to the chamber's center. She cupped her hands around her mouth and called out loudly enough for the audio sensors to transmit clearly. Her message was simple but devastating in its implications. She thanked her captors for the excellent training exercise and politely requested more challenging scenarios for tomorrow. Zara 9 stepped back from the barrier, her worldview cracking under the weight of revelation. The Caltharians had not captured a test subject. They had provided a learning opportunity to something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Amy Johnson was not just surviving their trials, she was enjoying them. As emergency alarms began sounding throughout the facility, Zara 9 realized that the greatest threat to Caltharian supremacy was not human technology or military might. It was human nature itself. The observation continued, but now the watchers had become the watched. Amy Johnson had shown them something terrifying about her species. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about the balance of power in the galaxy. Humans did not break under pressure. They thrived on it, and that changed everything.